we can argue about tariffs, but why does the president have to lie all of the time in order to make his point?
So, Senator, I would just refute that when the president is talking about the nature of the emergency we have. I mean,
could you talk a little bit closer into the mic, please?
Certainly. Senator, I would just say, I think you need to look at what the president issued in terms of the order for the legal basis for what we're doing, right? I mean, the president very rightly hit on this issue of fentanyl migration coming from northern southern borders, and it's a real emergency.
Drugs are a real emergency. 0.2%. You can then argue illegal drugs come from every country in the world. If you declare that as an emergency, you're giving the President of the United States unbelievable power. Let me go on that point. Let me mention to you what you probably know. 7 Republicans have joined a number of Democrats on legislation reasserting Congress's ability to play an active role in trade and tariffs. That, on the Republican side, was led by Senator Grassley. And he said, and I quote, "For too long, Congress has delegated its clear authority to regulate interstate and foreign commerce to the executive branch, et cetera, et cetera." He wants to reassert Congress's constitutional role and ensure Congress has a voice in trade policy, end of quote. In the last 2 weeks, all we have seen is reports in the newspaper. Congress has not had 1 ounce of authority in determining tariff policy. Do you think Congress should be completely left out of the process? Or does the president have emergency power to do anything he wants with regard to tariffs?
Senator, my staff has had over 200 meetings with congressional offices in the past 2 months to consult. The president's been very transparent about what he wants to do on tariffs. Congress delegated the law to him to take this action.
Mr. Greer, you can have all the meetings you want. You and I had a nice meeting. But at the end of the day, the president did exactly what he wanted to do without any discussion, formal discussion with members of Congress. He could make recommendations to Congress, that's for sure. Do you really think that he has the power under an emergency degree to reorder the trade world, global trade policy, without any input from the United States Congress?
Sir, Congress gave him this law where if he determines a national emergency, he can take appropriate action to regulate imports. That's what he's done.
And you think it's a national emergency that 0.2% of fentanyl coming from Canada constitutes a national emergency?
Sir,
do you?
The president has determined
that
Canada...
I'm asking you.
You're asking me about drug policy. So I agree with the president. If you have China and Canada and Mexico putting drugs into this country at different levels, then that's an emergency. We have to deal with it.
Look, we're not going to argue about the danger of drugs.
Could you talk a little bit about the relationship of the tariffs that you have put on and rising prices for the American people? What is it the American people should expect to be able to suffer as a result in terms of rising prices? I understand your position is that the long-term gain is worth the short-term pain, but what is that short-term pain going to look like?
So Senator, I think we can look at, I think we should look at history and data for this. It's hard to project what's going to happen with prices, but we know in the first Trump term, the president imposed historic tariffs on China on an enormous amount of goods coming from China. And during that time, inflation went down by 0.1%. During the Biden administration, the historic inflation was not on imported goods or related to tariffs that President Biden put in place. It was related to, frankly, services, healthcare, education, et cetera. So I think there's not really a one-to-one on tariffs and price effects, and so many things go into price. I know you think I'm probably like dodging and weaving on this, but I'm looking at data, sir,
yeah,
and the data shows it's not one-to-one.
I know you're smart enough to know that the likelihood is that prices are going to go up for the American people as a result of the tariffs that you put in place. Do you disagree with that?
Oh,
I mean, when you say that the in your testimony that you expect the American people will bear the burden, or that, and I'm sure they will bear any burden on some level. But what do you think that burden is actually going to look like?
Well, I think the challenges, frankly, are going to be more for companies that are largely dependent on imports from China and Asia, where they have to adjust their supply chains.
Pretty well successfully deflected all of Senator Bennett's questions about what the immediate impact looks like in the short-term pain for the long-term gain. I just want to flag for you one issue that is very important to me. Rhode Island is a small business state, right? We don't have a whole lot of big mega corporations there who can balance things and move things around. Canada is our largest trading partner. We have companies who fill an important niche in the global supply chain, and particularly in American companies' supply chains, because they get something from Canada, or let's say China, could be, but Canada's our major trading partner, and they process that thing, and then they put it into the supply chain for the larger corporate entities. That's their business. That's all they've got. So if we're not looking out for these small businesses that are actually going to have to lock their doors and close the shutters and fire their employees and go out of business, I think you've missed a huge hole in the problem that these tariffs have created. If all you're listening to is the big mega corporations who can move things around the world and have the resources to dodge these effects, you're not getting the straight story. I think in every one of our states, there are going to be small businesses that occupy a niche in which trade is an important factor and that are going to go bust because of these tariffs. And I urge you to look out for those businesses because I don't think they're getting their voices heard at all.
So, Senator, I've talked to you about this. I've talked to Senator Hassan about this and others. One thing I asked my team to do last week was to convene a meeting of I have a trade advisory council for small business. I've asked them to convene that meeting. I've connected with the Small Business Administration. They have an international trade desk there. I've talked to I have an office that also deals with small business because I do want to hear it. I think it's important that we hear it because they don't have the same voices in Washington. I will say right now, Canada and Mexico, things coming from Canada and Mexico that comply with the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement come in duty-free. They continue to do so if they follow the rules. If they don't follow the rules and are trying to put in Chinese stuff, that's going to be tariffed.
I just am concerned that there's no strategy at all. I'm committed. We understand in the Pacific Northwest what the stakes are. To have a smart, tough strategy, I don't see any strategy at all, and you really haven't said much about what the strategy is this morning.
Senator, I appreciate your concern. I want to keep having a conversation with you about this, but I see a distinct difference between those countries who have come to us and they said, we understand your issues, we understand the deficit, we understand your desire for reciprocity, and we want to work with you on this. And the Chinese approach, which has been, we're going to retaliate, we're trying to remedy a situation. We're trying to remedy a situation that's persisted for many years, and it would be wonderful if the Chinese agreed with that and wanted to persist in, work with us on that, but that's not where they are, and the president has recognized this.
As USTR's chief of staff in the first Trump administration, you oversaw the negotiation of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, the USMCA, and the renegotiation of the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, the KORUS. President Trump signed both of these agreements. He called the USMCA a colossal victory, and KORUS a historic milestone. And yet, with President Trump's new blanket tariffs, he is ripping up these agreements with our allies that we negotiated with. Why would any country want to do business with us, much less negotiate a trade deal, if we don't even honor our ongoing agreements?
So, Senator, we are the consumer of last resort. These countries have to sell here. They have, many of them, especially in Asia, have built their entire economies around exporting to us. They're very dependent on it, and that's part of why we have this huge trade deficit. With USMCA, those parties continue to enjoy duty-free treatment for many of the products that continue to comply with the rules that were set out 5 years ago. There's a big concern, Senator, that we did not have adequate other protections to stop the flow, particularly of like autos into the United States.
But there was a process for you to renegotiate that agreement this year. We talked about that in my office. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And it wasn't to do these blanket tariffs, correct?
What we have to address is an emergency, Senator.
That's true. And you should be honest. At least as you sit here, as you were in my office, be intellectually honest. Now, let me just ask this, because this is also true. And I so appreciate my Senator Langford asking this. Time matters. How long did it take to negotiate that agreement, the USMCA, that you were part of?
We did it at breakneck speed. We did it in about 2 years.
2 years. And now you're telling us you have nearly 50 countries coming to you, approaching you to enter in a negotiation. And you think that you can do that overnight?
India.
Man, you're pretty superhuman here, if that's the case. So let's be realistic. That's all we're asking. Common sense.
And I've met you, Ambassador Greer. I think you're a smart guy, but I don't think just because this is the way Donald Trump wants the world to be for the last 40 years that he can simply will it into happening. In my state, the Port of Virginia accounts for $124 billion in trade. That amounts to about 500,000 jobs. Those are all up for grabs now. We got 800,000 small businesses in Virginia. These tariffs are going to wallop them. I had last week a guy in from a local brewery in Alexandria. The owner's name is Bill. He's got a triple whammy. He gets his Pilsner from Canada. He gets his bottle caps from Mexico. He gets his kegs from Germany. So already, even in advance of these all kicking in at midnight tonight, he's laid off 10% of his staff. Even if the president flips on all this, he's not bringing folks back. I mean, candidly, I had another guy in from who makes bourbon and sells a lot to Canada. He thinks it'll be a cold day in hell before the Canadians start buying American bourbon again, simply because our trust relationship has been broken. So I guess the first question I want to give, I'm trying to figure out what would be a question that maybe folks haven't asked. Let me ask you on this one. Australia is one of our strongest allies. We have the AUKUS relationship, which is key to their national security. It's key to our industrial base, so we can continue to build subs. Terribly important. Interesting thing with Australia is we have a free trade agreement with Australia. We don't have tariffs. We even have one of the few industrial countries, we have a trade surplus with Australia. So, Ambassador Greer, can you explain to me how it helps America's national security or our trading balance when we have, and I loved your fancy Greek formula, which was basically bad math on steroids formula, how with a trade surplus, with this strong relationship, Australia got hit with a 10% tariff as well?
Senator, Australia has the lowest rate available under the new program. They ban imports of American beef and pork.
Ambassador, excuse me. There is a trade. We already have a free trade agreement. We have a trade surplus. So getting the least bad, why did they get whacked in the first place?
We're addressing the $1.2 trillion deficit, the largest in human history that President Biden left us with. We should be running up the score in Australia.
Ambassador Greer, answer the question on Australia. We have a trade surplus with Australia. We have a free trade agreement. Why? They are an incredibly important national security partner. Why were they whacked with a tariff?
Senator, despite the agreement, they ban our beef, they ban our pork. They're getting ready to impose measures on our digital companies. It's incredible.
With your Greek letter formula, the fact that we have a trade surplus.
We have a global tariff on everywhere. We're trying to address the $1.2 trillion deficit that Biden left us with.
I think that answer, sir, you're a much smarter person than that answer. The idea that we are going to whack friend and foe alike, and particularly friends, with this level is both, I think, insulting the Australians, undermines our national security, and frankly makes us not a good partner going forward.
I will just follow up again, then help explain the pain that people are feeling today with your assessment of what Donald Trump said, that families should feel some pain. That's all okay with you all?
Senator, we're not going to be in a situation where we keep allowing Wall Street to run the economy. And as we're making that transition, companies
you know what, Mr. Greer,
will need to adjust.
Go spend a little time at the grocery store talking to some of my constituents back home. I'll take you around. We'll walk around. We're not going to give anyone a heads up. You just go do it. And let's see what the regular folks back home are doing, including the people that come and talk to me that say they voted for this president. This is not what they stand up for. Farmers and ranchers are getting the short end of the stick from USDA, where these grants are being cut, and they say, oh, no, it's because we don't want to give people food. Baloney. You're cutting the lifeline for these farmers and ranchers as well, in addition to what's happening with these inputs with tariffs. Look, you all are a lot smarter than I. I'm just a regular person back home. I'm one of them.
happy to come visit with you,
That's
sir.
the difference between you and I, sir.
Look, if Republicans are serious about protecting American jobs and fighting inflation, then they can join Democrats right now to pass a resolution to fix Trump's reckless tariffs. This economy is teetering on the edge of collapse. We have the power right here in the Senate and over in the House of Representatives to take this authority away from Donald Trump. We can get this voted on. Senator Wyden and I have already are about to introduce the bill to do that. And if Republicans are serious about not playing the red light, green light with tariffs, but instead about protecting our economy, our families, our jobs, and keeping prices low, then Republicans should join us on that.